Welcome to Scaling in the Sand, the podcast where we unpack how leaders build, grow, and scale businesses across the Middle East. I'm your host, Lloyd Creamer, founder of Ara Talent. Each episode, I sit down with founders, operators, and executives who have built teams and companies under unique pressures. From rapid growth to regional expansion, and we dig into what really drives scale in this region. Today, I'm joined by Yi-Wei Ang, Chief Product Officer at Talabat. Yi-Wei has been with Talabat for over 5 years and was central to their journey to a successful IPO in December 2024, a valuation of in excess of $10 billion. We're going to unpick some of that journey, discuss how to ensure a business is ready for such a significant event. Yi-Wei, pleasure to see you as always. I've given a very brief introduction there, but I'd love if you could give our listeners a bit of an intro and tell us how you brought yourself to be CPO of a $10 billion business in the Middle East.
Thank you for having me here, Lloyd. My name is Yi-Wei. I've been in Dubai for about 7 years now. We just crossed our 7-year mark. Originally, we were in Singapore before this. And I would say that 7 years ago when we came to Dubai, the tech scene here was just in its infancy, right? I remember all the tech companies at the time were in Shatta Tower in one building. And it's amazing to see how things have really evolved. So I was at Property Finder as VP of Product for about 1.5 years before I ventured into Talabat at the time, where we were at the time just a food delivery business with a big ambition, right? Over the last 5.5 years, we've gone from food to groceries, from groceries to a subscription business, from a subscription business to a fintech business, and sort of marked everything and wrapped everything up with an IPO event last year, which reminds me that the beginning is just there. You know, we're just getting started in our very, our 21-year-old journey, and the road is long. I think in the Middle East, there's so much to build. There's so many opportunities to serve customers and riders and restaurants and partners that we have, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this evolves.
And I'm sure you won't mind me saying, we've known each other for about 7 years now, right? I think you were pretty new to the region when we first met, and I think it's fair to say you had a degree of uncertainty about tech in this region, right? Having worked in the States and then in Singapore, and in probably what at that time, definitely what at that time were more leading regions from a technology standpoint. You've touched on it there, but what's your view on the kind of pace of change here and how much that's changed in those 7 years?
It's insane. I remember when I first moved to Dubai and I had to build the product and tech organization in Property Finder, I spent about 15 to 20 minutes before we went into what the company was about in every interview, explaining to people what living in Dubai was like. You had to explain to candidates what Dubai is like, what living in the Middle East was like, why they should consider moving here, how it's not career suicide if they move here in the tech world. And today, it's quite the opposite. Now more than ever before, I'm getting a ton of LinkedIn messages and emails from people who are like, hey, I used to work in, Facebook in the States or Microsoft in the States, and I'm looking to move back to the region. And I've heard about Talabat. Can we chat a little bit about what opportunities you guys have? And I think that's a real testament to how things can really change here in a 5 to 7 year period. And that's amazing, right? It takes most markets, decades to really shift capital, shift talent, for all of this change to happen. In the Middle East, just in a few short years, we saw all of this happening, right? Not just in Dubai, but also in Saudi. Also, we have a big tech hub in Cairo. I'm seeing the evolution there as well. And it's really amazing to see how all of this is coming together.
Yeah, I agree. And I can testify to the point of inbound talent. We are seeing just such a massive uptick in the amount of candidates coming to us looking for opportunities, whereas I first moved here 10 years ago. To attract somebody from the US, it was very, very difficult. And the key difference is, I think, the caliber. The caliber's high now. It wasn't before, and it is now because of stories like Talabat, right? So let's segue into that. I'd like to start with talking about how you prepare a business to go through such an event, with a kind of focus on 2 areas, really, both structurally, so some kind of practical thoughts, but also culturally, because obviously the event is not a secret, right? And the culture within the business is critical to then, I believe, the continuation of the business after the event, if that makes sense. So can we touch on that first, on the structural side and what you had to work on in the years leading up to the IPO?
So maybe as a bit of background, what a lot of people don't realize is Talabat's a very old company. We're 21 years old. And over the years, we've grown and evolved from a tech company that was built in the basement of a building in Kuwait to moving our headquarters to Dubai, to being acquired by Delivery Hero quite a few years ago now. And through the entire process, I would say that we've grown in maturity, right? And when I joined Talabat, we were just at the cusp of sort of figuring ourselves out on what it means to be a tech startup and move really quickly, but at the same time be ready for a much more mature event like an IPO. And of course, what that entailed was we, at the time built up our legal foundations, our finance foundations. We have a fantastic CFO who over the last couple of years has led us through just maturity in a lot of our practices, right? And being part of a publicly listed company before, Delivery Hero, also helped a lot, right? Because all the prep work that we did, for our day-to-day operations just led very nicely into an IPO event here in Dubai, right? From a product and tech perspective, the one thing that I believe is the most critical part of an IPO event is really being able to tell the story of what product and tech brings to the table, especially if you're trying to IPO a tech company, right? For a lot of companies like ours, people might see it as, oh, you're a food delivery company, you can get food from one place to another or groceries from one place to another. But what a lot of people don't realize is the technology that goes behind that, right? The optimizations that we do on the consumer experience, optimizations on logistics, on ads, on how we think about personalization, on fintech and how we think about risk and fraud. Like all of this is technology. And as part of the big IPO event, I spent a lot of time thinking about the storyline of what we wanted to tell our investors, and also to paint a bit of a picture of where we're going to be for the next 5-10 years, right? And I think that's the exciting part. A lot of times when you're in a company, you think perhaps quarter after quarter, or think about the budget that you're trying to hit for the year. But the IPO event makes you think in the 5-year horizon, the 10-year horizon. You're really trying to tell a picture of, hey, if you're a long-term investor into Talabat, here's where we're going to be, and here's what we want to build for the region. I think that's super exciting to be able to do.
So when you joined in, I guess,
2020, yeah.
2020, I guess the IPO has been spoken about already.
Actually, surprisingly, I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
For us, we were very much part of the Delivery Hero group, and they were already a publicly listed company.
Yeah.
And the IPO conversation really didn't happen, that early on. That being said, I think, as I was mentioning, I think the maturity that we had in the organization just made us very IPO ready. So whenever the event was appropriate, we could execute relatively quickly.
And I'd like to touch on, I want to get onto some of the scaling piece, but around the structural side, you mentioned CFO, who's been instrumental, and I don't know the exact time frame, but I believe since you joined would have been when the new CEO came in as well. So there was obviously a significant change at a board level too, right, for an executive team. How key would you say the relationship between that executive committee, which is a new relationship in many instances, was to the success of the journey?
One thing that we talk about a lot when we went to the IPO event was how long this management team has worked together. And I believe that most companies sort of win and lose first and foremost by the quality of their management team, how they work together, how they make decisions. Are they customer-centric enough? Are they long-term thinking enough? And I've been really fortunate to be part of a management team that has been molded and shaped together over the last 4 to 5 years. When our new CEO came, Tomaso, about 6 years ago, is when he sort of hired a ton of us, put us in the right seats. And through just growing this business and scaling Talabat is how we got to learn how to work very well together. We get a lot of questions about the leadership team as part of the IPO process and what we're made of. And when investors meet us, they ask us a ton of questions about each of our respective functions. And I would say that it's super critical to have a strong management team that can really work together to solve top problems.
And I think from an outside perspective, the leadership team at Talabat are very real. They feel very real from the outside. I mean, we know each other really well anyway, but even outside of that, you're very present and you have a personal brand in the market, as does Tommaso, right? I haven't met Tommaso personally, but I remember watching a video that he posted where he was a driver for a day. And I thought, how many CEOs would be prepared to do that, right? And so I think that not only does the image
probably look great from an investor's perspective, but actually from a user's perspective, from a customer's perspective, and that probably brings us back around to the product conversation, how real the business is from top to bottom.
Yeah, I love that you're mentioning that, because we had a big rebrand event about a year ago, and at the core of the rebrand, what we want to stand for is being real, right? And what I love about working at a company like Talabat is that we're a very mass market consumer brand, right? If you stop anyone in the middle of the street and you ask them, hey, do you order food delivery? The answer is generally yes. And if you ask them what app they use, they will also tell you they have Talabat on the phone, right? And I think that's really cool. It's really cool to be able to serve millions of customers. And when you serve that sort of quantity, that number of customers on a day-to-day basis, you have to be very real. Like there's no there's no way about it. Like I believe that we're a core good, that runs a good chunk of the commercials in the Middle East. I think we very much moved the Middle East forward, and we're very excited to be able to play that role in the markets which we operate.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like you say, it's a product that's so close to so many people, right? And I know one of the big things about Talabat is the repeat orders, the people who are eating every night, pretty much, on Talabat, which I think is very unique. Talk a little bit about scale. Could you give us just an idea of what your product org looked like, and perhaps we can talk around the tech org as well when you joined?
Yeah.
And then what that has scaled up to today.
So maybe let's start a little bit about the core principles of how I think about building a product and tech organization. So first principles is when we design an org and an org chart, the product and tech org needs to be designed together.
Okay.
Right. And I would argue by extension also design and data, I think they're components that are designed together. What I've learned as well is that it's super important in a company that is very operationally heavy and commercially heavy like Talabat, to also have in the same design a conversation on the commercial side of the world. So for example, if I'm making big investments into groceries, I need to make sure that there's a corresponding investment in groceries in the commercial part of the world. Right? If we're thinking about building an ads business for groceries, well, we better have a commercial team that's ready to sell ads, in groceries. So when I think about my org chart in product and tech, I very much think about it as a company challenge that we have. Now, when I first came to Talabat, we were a single vertical business. We were a food business and food business only. We had big aspirations at the time. We thought about what it would be like to, get into groceries. We thought about what it would be like to get into a loyalty program. And over time, we've built this. And the way I think about it is, for us, there's sort of the core business, and historically it's been food. And there are startups within that we're trying to fund using, the foundations that we have in food, right? So when I joined 5 years ago, groceries was a new little startup, right? We operated like a startup. We tracked, daily orders on a whiteboard to see how we were evolving. We were calling customers on a day-to-day to understand how their experience was operationally and also through the product experience. And over time, these businesses matured. Right. So, we used to have, for example, what we call the new ventures team. The new ventures team would do things like groceries and a loyalty program. And as those new ventures evolved, they became permanent teams. They were spun off. Right. So right now I have our food business as a team, and that's obviously a very large team. We have our groceries team, which is a very large team, a fintech team, a growth team, which looks at our ads products and our subscription product. And obviously a big foundational team as well that thinks about our infrastructure and how we scale Talabat as a whole. So for me, it's really exciting to see how this organization has evolved over time. And a really big part of that is also thinking about how we can maintain agility while having a scale of a 500-person product and engineering team.
Well, that's what I wanted to come to was the numbers have obviously grown, and to maintain agility with a growing business that needs structure and discipline in order to be IPO ready must be really hard. And you came from a business prior that was not small, but much smaller. So how do you maintain that?
It's incredibly hard, I would say. One thing that people don't realize is that as you add more and more people to the organization, just the overhead of communication and dependencies with each other, it's a lot. It becomes a lot very quickly. The way we think about it is we try and modularize as much of our product and engineering organization as possible, right? So if the groceries business can operate more or less on their own in a 60 or 70 person team and can run with all the groceries topics with their commercial counterparts without big dependencies across the organization, that's amazing. That means that they can operate as a little entity, as a little startup without being, hugely disentangled with everybody else. Quite the opposite is, organizations that are cut incorrectly, where doing one thing requires changes in 20 other teams, and the coordination costs are super high, and you have to apply, a very big PMO layer to just get things to move. That's not a direction that we generally like to head in, right? So one thing that we actively do is we try and look for where the consistent roadblocks are, and address that, right? It might be, for example, 2 years ago, we realized that everyone needed changes on the checkout experience because, whether you do groceries or fintech or subscription, like you need to process payments somehow. And we were just super roadblock on that. So that's where we applied, when we thought about where we needed to re-architect our work and rebuild things. We first rebuilt the areas where a lot of the choke points were, where the roadblocks were, cleared that out, and that then unlocked the organization.
Interesting. You've spoken a lot about product and tech. You're really using those words synonymously, product to tech, product and engineering. And I think what I've seen is there's been an evolution in the market whereby perhaps if you rewind maybe around 7 years, kind of the sort of time that you came here, organizations very much, I think first of all, probably didn't understand product really. They knew it was this thing that was happening elsewhere in the world and they needed it, but very much didn't understand how to integrate product to tech, and they sat as quite siloed verticals. And we're seeing that change now. They seem far more integrated, and there's also the evolution of the chief product and technology officer role, right, which is something that I think has been present in probably the States and Western Europe for a little while, but perhaps not so much here. And we've started to see the first few chief product and tech officers pop up. I'm interested to get your views on that and how that integration has come about.
So you're right in the sense that product is a relatively new discipline, whereas tech has always been there if you're a tech company, all right? And I would say that, we found ourselves in product to also, realize that without our tech counterparts and our data counterparts, our design counterparts, or our commercial counterparts, we really can't do very much. And a lot of the impact that product people have is by working in very, very close collaboration with their tech counterparts, right? And I've been fortunate at Talabat over the last, 5 and 6 years to have two amazing CTOs, which are amazing partners to me, right? We basically won or lost together. There was no, hey, tech had a great year, but product didn't, or vice versa. We had the same OKRs, so we had the same targets.
Interesting.
If I got a good rating, our CTO should also get a good rating. Like, we were very much tied at the hip. Where I see the evolution of chief product technology officer coming in is, as organizations evolve, they also come to realize what kind of organization they are. So for example, if you're OpenAI and you're a deep tech company, the role of a chief technology officer is to really push the boundaries of what is possible through tech, right? You're thinking about big innovations in technology. You're thinking about how do you sort of break the boundaries of what technology is actually available to drive that business impact. Now, a lot of organizations that we have today are, tech-enabled organizations, where as a product and tech team, we're here to leverage technology to drive a consumer experience or to solve a business problem. And in many of those cases, it's not about using cutting-edge technology per se, but knowing what technology to use to solve a real problem. Okay. The focus is really about problem solving, right? We're not building a tech platform. We're not building, an LLM model, right? And in a lot of those cases, I think what a lot of companies have realized is that the concept of a CPTO or CTPO is actually quite useful to have, these different parts of the organization into one. Now, what I've seen is a bunch of different models, right? Sometimes it's a CTO who has absorbed a product organization. Sometimes it's a CPO that is extended to take on the tech remit as well. It really comes in all sorts of different flavors. I've even seen sort of VPs of design stepping into a CPTO role to absorb everything, especially for very consumer heavy experiences. So I think we're in an evolution right now, and we will see how all of this plays out.
I'm interested. This is a bit of a side point here, but I'd like to get your insights. You just mentioned VP design. The design world is in an interesting space right now, right? We've got about 20 minutes in without talking about AI, but let's briefly talk about it. My brother's a visual designer, visual effects designer in the UK, and he speaks to me a lot about the uncertainty around the industry, right? And all our jobs going to get taken by AI, and that argument ebbs and flows. From your perspective, what do you feel is kind of the honest, hard truth of the impact that AI is going to have? And we can extend it across product and tech as well, but I think particularly in design, it's super relevant.
I think across all functions, it's super relevant. One thing that we're about to do in about 2 weeks is an AI week at Talabat, where we're getting 500 people in product and engineering to drop everything they're doing for a week with the sole purpose of ramping themselves up on AI tools. We are finally there, I believe, where we are seeing material gains in productivity when teams are leveraging AI. So what was the journey that we took on? Well, about a year ago, I tasked a team who I thought was a relatively well-performing team across product, engineering, data, and design to say, you guys are a well-functioning team. Here's an unlimited budget. Use all the tools that you want. And can you come back to me in 6 months and help me understand the productivity gains that you're getting? And what you're seeing is that, when you get a top engineer, for example, to leverage some of the AI tools, they're really 2-3xing their productivity on a day-to-day basis.
Wow.
You could probably argue the same for a PM who's using the right AI tools for data analyses or to come up with new ideas of what things that they should build, or designers who can prototype way quicker. What I think the focus shouldn't be about is AI taking away jobs, especially in tech, when I think the opportunities are massive. What we should talk about is how, as a designer, your jobs can get much more exciting. One tool that we've built inside of Talabat is and the ability for us to convert a prototype, which a designer has designed in Figma, into code immediately. I think that's super exciting. And what it empowers a designer to do is that they can prototype 10 different versions of the app. They can get it, into a workable, usable product and in front of users in a day or two.
Just takes rapid prototyping.
I mean, that's never happened before, right? And so the way I would position is, as a designer, what an exciting time to be alive. What an exciting time for you to really, accelerate your craft. And I'm really excited to see how this evolves over time.
I agree. And I think that the world has been through these huge transitional moments many times, right? We had the Industrial Revolution and everyone thought that, panel beaters were no longer going to be building cars. It was going to be built on a production line. But what did that do? It created a huge amount of jobs on production lines. And we had this little thing crop up about 30 years ago called the internet, which was going to ruin everybody's jobs. And actually it created a whole new industry in itself. And I completely agree. I think it's a mindset. It's a mindset of embracing rather than fighting against, but it'll be interesting to see how it develops. I want to draw it back a little bit onto the scaling side. So how big's your product org today at Talabat?
So product and engineering combined is about 500. Okay. And I would say that we have about probably 50 or so in product management itself.
I mean, that's a big product. That's probably the biggest product team in the region, I would suggest.
Probably the biggest product and engineering team in the region.
Yeah, I would agree. And when I first started speaking with Talabat many years ago, it was a fraction of that size, right? I'm interested to understand how you've built structure, so leadership, because when you start getting to a 500-person team, you're talking a big matrix management structure, there, right? And how you've matured, particularly the product org, but the product and tech org, to have that degree of leadership and matrix management within it.
First and foremost, my biggest belief is that if you hire smart people with potential, things will figure themselves out. And what's been quite amazing in the Talabat journey is that if you look at my leadership team, whether on the tech side or the product side, sort of director plus, you realize that the vast majority of them have been working at Talabat for the last 5 or 6 years. So they were hired in that initial wave and have grown together with Talabat. I think that's probably the best and most sustainable way to grow leadership, because we're such a unique business. We're a 3-sided marketplace that wants to operate at the speed of a startup, while at the same time, we're running at huge scale and a publicly listed company. You have to sort of mold your leaders to be able to do that. What's been exciting to see is, a lot of our leaders actually sometimes leave us for a year or two, do their own startup, try a couple things at different companies and come back. And I welcome that. I think, when you leave and you come back, it enriches your experiences. You bring so much more to the table. And it's been exciting to see how that works out. right? So for me, a lot of it is a growth mindset. If you hire people with a strong will and growth mindset and willingness to learn and give, the 110% on a day to day, it usually works out for me.
So diving into the hiring piece, right? So if you hire smart people, the rest will look after itself. So that puts a huge amount of pressure on hiring the right people
Absolutely.
that are smart. And when you're hiring at that level of scale, if you just work the filter up to the number of candidates that you need in at the top of the funnel through to the number that you're going to hire if you have high standards, it's a huge task, right? So how do you create a robust process to hire smart people who are going to stick around for 5 years and maybe even come back after leaving, but also be able to cope with that level of volume?
Yeah. So a couple angles. Firstly, I think our hiring process is quite unique in the sense that we have a very strong partnership with the talent acquisition team, where we have our sponsors in product and design and data who will sit side by side with our talent acquisition team to review pipeline, to review the process. And we change our process probably every 6 months just to understand what's working and what's not, and where are candidates falling off. Is it a process problem, or is it a pay scale problem, or is it are we not selling, the vision more strongly enough? We have sort of our functional leaders go really deep with our talent acquisition team to figure that out. We don't like thinking about hiring as a people operations problem or a TA problem and sort of leave them in the corner and call us when you have a good candidate. But we really see it as a very strong partnership, and it's through that we've been able to hire some good people. The other thing I would say is we invest a lot in employer branding.
Yeah.
And, for me, for example, it would mean, I spend a disproportionate amount of time flying around building a story about what working at Talabat is going to be like. I talk about my product philosophy. I talk about what we're here to build. I talk about, the culture that we want to build. And through that, I get a lot of inbound. And I think that helps a lot because it automatically filters out people who have good culture fit with you. I think, and maybe lastly, when you do good work, everything gets a bit easier. Like people recognize a good product when they see a good product, and they want to be part of the organization that builds it.
It's kind of self-fulfilling, isn't it? And I think people that come to this region in product, well, I know because they come to me, people in this region that come into product and go, I say, if you could give me 5-10 companies out here that you'd like to work for, that you admire their product, very, very commonly, Talabat is on that list. And thankfully, I know the chief product officer, so I can pass their details on to you. Really interesting. So in terms of what's going to change now, what's different now, and what the future looks like. I mean, obviously the IPO was 10 months ago now, right? So a little bit of time for it to all bed in. What you're seeing is the main change and the main difference for the business pre to post?
I think we are focusing much more on the medium to long term and the storyline. I mean, it's interesting because, when you're a publicly listed company, you can sort of open Yahoo Finance and look at your stock price every day and think, on a day-to-day basis. But at the end of the day, what we have to remind ourselves is that we're here to build a lasting business, right? And the job is hardly done. The crazy part about our industry is that if you look at just the sheer population of the markets that we're operating, look at Egypt, massive population. Look at, our growth markets like Iraq and Jordan, massive population. We're hardly penetrated. There's so much opportunity for us to serve in so many ways. Think about fintech, for example, right? We just launched our postpaid product in Egypt, where we're offering credit to users to buy their food and their groceries. This is not something that any other player has done in ever, in Egypt, and we think that there's just so much opportunity for us to do that. And so I would say that what's exciting for us is to keep hammering home on our strategy, which is, not only do we want to be amazing at food, we want to use that to also grow our ecosystem, right? From groceries to subscription to fintech. And the perfect storm here is when, people use all of our different services and they all start to come together, right? For example, in Dubai today, if you use our Dine Out product where you can, get a discount when you go out to eat at a restaurant, you realize that you get more of a discount if you're a pro subscribed user. So as opposed to 10% off, maybe you get an additional 15% off. So that's one additional value, right? But when you go to the restaurant, you also realize when you get to checkout, hey, postpaid is available. So if you have 1,000 dirhams of credit, you can use postpaid to pay for your dinner, right? So it starts to all come together. And that's the future we want to build, where Talabat as a service starts to have all these different components that really help all of the different verticals which we operate in become that much better. And that's super exciting to build.
And I think that these multifaceted products, multifaceted consumer products are where we've seen the most success, right? If you look at Kareem as an example, right?
Yeah.
It went from when I first moved here to simply being a competitor to Uber, to now being this super app that does so many other things, and same with Talabat, traditionally a food delivery product and now does so much more. So it's just, that's an evolution that has happened very, very quickly. And I think there's no doubt it's going to continue to. Can we very quickly touch on Saudi? I know that the Delivery Hero group operate heavily in Saudi Arabia, I think through one of their other entities.
Through Hunger Station.
Through Hunger Station. Because you mentioned Iraq, Jordan as growth markets. Anyone you ever speak to at the moment about growth markets talk Saudi. What's your view in terms of the opportunity there?
I think it's a massive opportunity, but at the same time, we have our sister company, Hunger Station, operating there. I think they're doing a fantastic job. In many ways, at Delivery Hero, between the chief product officers, we all get along super well. We share experiment results. We learn from each other. In fact, we're often backed by very similar sort of services that can sort of accelerate all of our respective product experiences. So, we're very much cheering on the Hunger Station team. I think they're doing a really great job building the product there in Saudi. Yeah, and for us, look, we have so many other markets to look at, right? I've been spending a lot of time with our MD in Iraq, solving for some very interesting problems today. For example, we're just cracking online payments in Iraq. Can you imagine? Wow. Up till about 6 months ago, the way to pay in Iraq was cash, right? So now, we're accepting credit cards for the first time, and you wouldn't even imagine that this is a topic because in Dubai, we never have to talk about this, right? But in a lot of our markets, there's still a lot to be cracked, and I'm excited to see some of this through.
So interesting that you're balancing challenges of having your team spend a week upskilling in AI here in Dubai to create, new opportunities for themselves, increase productivity, and then the next week you're figuring out how to move from cash to credit card payments in Iraq. Right?
Absolutely.
The
That's
disparity of those
part.
challenges.
That's the exciting part about working in this region is that, what I'm also confident in that is in 6 months, a year and a half, I don't know, we might be at 80, 90% online payments in Iraq. You never know. This region moves so quickly that if you play your cards right and ride the right waves, man, change can happen really fast.
Yeah. And for you, you've seen the change in the region, right? You've probably, your mindset has shifted. That's more of a, recent past and present scenario. Future, do you see this region as the future? Do you see somewhere else across the world?
Look, I am extremely bullish on the Middle East. Every year that goes by, I see so if you think a little bit about what are the pieces that need to happen, right? One, you need capital flowing. You need capital and investments into the region to fund startups, to fund opportunities. And I think that's happening at full scale at the moment. Second, you need talent density. That was historically lacking. But now you have these, big tech companies, whether it's Talabat or Property Finder or Kareem or, pick your company of choice, but they're generating a ton of alumni, who are getting out there and starting companies and joining companies as leaders. And I think that ecosystem starts to build. And third, you have success stories. You have success stories which gives people a reason to believe that, you can build, billion-dollar businesses. How many do we have now? We have quite a few success stories now over the last couple of years. Right? Property Finder, another massive win, over the last couple of months. And I think when all of these pieces come together, you can only see that it starts to compound, right? So I'm excited to see what happens in the next decade here in the region.
And I think it's really legitimizing this region.
Absolutely.
I think that you probably yourself, you'd self-admit, and many, many others 10 years ago still looked with a certain degree of mysteria about this place and what's really going. Is it all a bit fake? And, is it just the shiny lights and the big buildings, or is it real? And we go back to the Talabat branding itself as being a real business. The country's really branding itself as being real now. You don't IPO, and I believe I'm right in saying that it was the largest tech IPO globally
in 2024. That's right.
For that to be a homegrown Middle East business is crazy.
And I think we're really proud and humbled to also be part of that story. And it's so true. It's so true. I think the governments here have really been playing their cards right. started obviously, in COVID when they opened the doors to a lot of investment, to a lot of talent from moving in, to right now there's a really big investment from the government also on AI,
Yeah.
right, and AI startups, and it's really great to see all of this coming together. I'll also say we have a big tech hub in Egypt as well, and it may not be a market that you focus on too much, but the talent in Egypt is amazing. If you look at a lot of the global tech leaders, take your FANGs of the world, and see where, if from the Arab world they're bringing the talent from, you'll see that a ton of it is from Egypt, right? And so our goal here is to make sure that the top candidates graduating from every university in Egypt are coming to Talabat, and we started an internship program. We have about 15 people now in our program for the first time. And we're excited to actually see how these interns evolve to being at Talabat full time.
I'd like to touch on one of the challenges that I'm seeing a lot of other companies have who are following this lead of building offshore technology functions in Egypt. Because I agree, I think that the talent's fantastic. The universities are kicking out some really, really great graduates. One of the problems other leaders I've spoken to in the region are having is retention because of places like Dubai. And for various different social economic factors. It's a stepping stone to then want to move to another region. That must be exacerbated by the fact that you have this huge hub, arguably probably the best office in Dubai. If anyone's not been to your office, it's mad. It's crazy. So how do you retain that quality there and not lose it to the big brother in Dubai,
And I think the key here is to not make Dubai the big brother.
Okay, yeah.
And I think, if we think of the Egypt hub as an offshore second hub, it will never become the hub that it needs to be. So what I've publicly told our Dubai team and the Egypt team is I love for the Egypt team to be the main hub for some of our key topics. And what has happened over the years is, when we started the hub years ago, it was the hub where we put a lot of our sort of back-end, non-critical topics in, right? It was our, POS teams in the past and this and that. But now, the core part of our food ordering team sits in Cairo. And that's exciting. That's exciting because it makes sense. Because Cairo is one of our fastest growing markets. So it makes sense that the food ordering team actually sits in Cairo. Now, what that gives you as an opportunity is that if you're the product and tech leader running food shopping and the ordering experience in Cairo, you are building for the entire MENA region out of the Cairo hub. You will never get that kind of growth opportunity in any other company in Cairo. This is my belief, right? So you give people such a great learning experience. They believe that, they really do believe that Talabat's the best place for them to learn at scale. We're excited about that, right? And we also hire leaders who are not just passionate about Talabat, but they're passionate about building tech as a long-term career prospect for, young people in the region and in Cairo. And so if you look at our site leads in Cairo, they're really, really passionate about, building an Egyptian tech culture. They're out there doing talks. They're teaching. We have a very strong partnership with the government there, where we have volunteers teaching people courses on engineering, and that's super exciting to be able to invest in.
Yeah, it's great. It sounds like they're super proud of it as well, which is brilliant. I want to finish off on going back to a point on the IPO. So. Obviously, Talabat's the probably most well documented in recent history here. But we've spoken about a number of other companies that have had, are now valued at over $1 billion. You mentioned Property Finder, I think Katopi and Kareem and others. So I expect there's going to be more, right? We know there's going to be more, and there'll be hopefully some people watching and listening to this who are thinking about going on that journey. There's very few founders that don't say they want to move to IPO one day. Reflecting on your experience, if you were to give a piece of advice to those people, potentially one thing that you guys did very well on reflection and one pitfall that you fell into or nearly fell into to avoid, what would they be?
I think one thing that we did very well was consistently reminded the entire organization of our reason for existing, our mission, our, why we're there. And I think that helps a lot because, then going to IPO, you just extend the story that you've been telling, to the public markets. And that felt quite natural to us. I would say that the pitfall to avoid a little bit is in the IPO process, you can feel like, the finance teams and legal teams and the processes become you, right? It's very easy to say, everything has to go through compliance and everything has to go through a legal review. And I think a lot of companies that go through IPO have a tendency to become very bureaucratic very fast. And I would say that we've avoided that in many ways. We have a CFO and a head of legal who are very business savvy and very pragmatic. And I think that's important. It's a pitfall that we could have fallen very deep into, and I've seen some public companies do that. But I think we've straddled that line pretty well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Really, really good insights. I've really enjoyed it. Such a different angle to some of the other people I've spoken to in terms of the scale of Talabat. What has come through for me is that we always end up back on people. Right? We can talk metrics and numbers and figures and dollar signs, but when you talk about the executive team, you talk about the Cairo hub, you talk about your product organization, it always comes back to the importance of people, right? And hiring, retaining, and nurturing the best people in the business. You've clearly done a very, very good job of that.
Thank you very much.
Which is testament to you and the wider Talabat business. So for our listeners, if you did enjoy this episode, follow Scaling in the Sand wherever you get your podcasts. Connect with us on LinkedIn for more stories from leaders shaping the region's growth. I'm Lloyd Creamer, and this has been Scaling in the Sand.